I had a thought today. It's part of another discussion. I actually didn't end up posting it because I couldn't think of how to articulate it at the time. But I did want to make a video on it because I think it is an important part of class design. It is a well-known concept that classes, well, actually, let's back it up a minute. To any game mechanic that players have access to, so classes, races, spells, feats, etc., has a certain amount of power budget. There's a certain amount of power that is supposed to be available at any given time from any given choice. So classes tend to be the bulk of a character's overall power. So the budget of a class tends to be pretty specific as you level up. In a perfect world, at least. So you would have, if you wanted to like break it down numerically, let's say level 1 you get 5 power or whatever your baseline is. At level 2 you're going to get plus 4 power. So whatever options are available at level 2 should all roughly correspond to that amount of power increase. And if you're doing a really good job as a designer, then you can pull that off. You can have different abilities available for the player to choose from that all roughly correspond to the same amount of power increase for the character. And that's what makes really interesting leveling up decisions when you have several different options to choose from. You can't take them all, and they're all roughly as powerful as each other. And there's no obvious right choice, and there's no obvious wrong choice. Power budget. The issue, and before I get to the issue, actually, you can see the overall power budget of the entire class by looking at the aggregate power level of all the features that class gets. So there's a power budget for each class, and the issue in 5th edition, we're getting back to that now, is that each class has a different power budget. And power budgets are spent in different ways. So let me give you an example. The fighter pays for all of its extra attack features by paying out a significant chunk of their power budget. It is the entire thing that they get at 3 different levels. So 3 full levels of the fighter are taken up just getting extra attacks. Whereas you switch over to, say, any caster with cantrips, and all of their attack cantrips scale up at the same levels automatically. That doesn't count against their power bonus at all. It's a little unfair. But this is the kind of thing that 5e does a lot. Anything that you get counts against your power budget unless it is part of... Unless you're a caster, basically, is what it kind of boils down to. You've got barbarians who get brutal critical. Again, 3 different levels, exceedingly minor increases. We're talking like percentages of a damage per round, statistically. And they count for 3 different levels of their progression, and they get nothing else at those levels. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. But here's something that I was comparing this to. If you look at a lot of the different, they weren't called subclasses back in the day, but in 4th edition, classes had different, I think we called them specs back in the day. So you could be like a storm spec sorcerer or a, whatever. But let's call them subclasses for now because it is familiar terminology and it works. So let's say you have your sorcerer and you can take one of the different subclasses: storm, cosmic, they had chaos, dragon. I want to say they had, no, that would be it. Yeah, there was the 4 of them. There may have been others in other supplements, but those are the main 4. Some of those so the sorcerer as a whole uses charisma as its primary ability score. Some of those subclasses, half of them, use dex as the secondary stat, and the other half use strength. Well, here's the thing, is that dex is inherently already better than strength. So if they get all just equivalent abilities, the dex ones are going to be stronger because you are using a stat that does other things. It adds to your AC. It adds to initiative, AC being the most important defense in fourth edition. It has AC and reflex, so it actually adds to 2 defenses, where strength only adds to fortitude. So what are you going to do? As a designer, you're left with the choice of either making sure everything is fair, and then you have half the subclasses that are just on paper strictly better than the other half, or you can give those strength-based subclasses an additional feature that makes it so that Dex is not the absolute unambiguously superior ability score. So both strength-based subclasses for the Sorcerer in 4th edition have an additional feature that lets them add strength to AC instead of Dex or Intelligence. And they get that in addition to, like, otherwise they have the same number of features that are, and you can like draw kind of one-for-one correspondences between those features. You know, this one increases your damage, this one gives you a resistance, and this one gives you like a once per fight ability that you can use. But they all get sort of the same rough outline of types of abilities. But then the strength-based ones get an additional one that lets them use strength for AC. And that is what keeps them even. And this is an idea that doesn't seem to occur to the 5th edition designers, where that kind of ability would be grossly overvalued. Just the ability to stay up with baseline using a different ability score for primarily flavor purposes, to be honest. Because in 5th edition, flavor is not free. The monk has to spend ki to use Flurry of Blows, despite the fact that using Flurry of Blows still does not keep them up with everyone else on their damage output. The barbarian has to rage. It has to use a limited ability to turn on all their class features. You know, extra attack is treated like it's its own feature, when for casters, scaling your at-will damage is free. You get that in addition. It's particularly egregious at level 5 because you're also getting 3rd level spells, which is the biggest spike in power. You know, but these things, like, the designers of 5th edition don't seem to understand what a power budget is or how to use it, or what it's supposed to accomplish. Because you can give free abilities that they're not ribbon features per se, because they do fundamentally change how your character behaves, but they are quality of life improvements. They're things that enable the viability of other things. That kind of feature, that kind of design should be free in the power budget. It doesn't count because all it's doing is bringing you up to baseline. And that, I think, is why in the 1D&D playtest, the Brawler is considered to be so bad. Because what they're doing is they're spending all the power budget for this subclass to bring unarmed attacks up to baseline. Whereas other fighters start at baseline and get features to bring their baseline up, you know, by specializing in weapons, by taking feats to do more damage with, you know, two-handed weapons or with ranged attacks or whatever. So you start with unarmed attacks, which is like the worst way to attack as a martial, and you're spending all your class's power budget improving something that is bad and bringing it up to as if you were using a weapon with no subclass. And that's kind of the issue with Monk, too, is that, like, yeah, they get to use unarmed attacks, but their unarmed attacks aren't better than using a sword. You know, it's a significant improvement from what it was, but it doesn't make it good. And the relative increase from where the class was seems to be the primary way that the 5th edition designers are calculating power budgets. You know, if a monk doubles its damage output, that is a huge spike of relative to its previous position. You know, let's say at a certain level, it says double all your damage. That's a huge spike relative to where the monk was, but it's not that huge a spike in terms of overall power compared to the other classes. And so I think that really is what it comes down to. Now that I'm talking about it out loud, I'm thinking about it, and I think that is how they see it. They're not looking at power budget in terms of objective overall ability. They're looking at it strictly in terms of, what percentage increase of power is this feature for this class. And that is why the classes are not balanced against each other. They're only balanced against themselves. Sometimes not even then. And that's just a strange way to build a game. And I think it's fundamentally flawed, and it is the source, the very core source of nearly all of the problems in 5th edition's design and in their balance in the gameplay. I think that's what it really comes down to, is that they aren't looking at power budget as an objective overall thing. They see every increase to a class as being taking out of that power budget. Again, unless you're a caster, in which case you get a bunch of stuff for free. So anyways, that's my thought on power budgeting and why it can be done wrong.